Welcome, everyone. This is Greg Rock, and on behalf of BPM Institute and Lombardi, I'd like to welcome you to today's roundtable featuring Lincoln Trust and their evolution from document workflow to BPM. As many of you know, our roundtable series are one of the ways in which BPM Institute promotes knowledge sharing and networking amongst our members and the BPM community at large. We do this through our website, our conference series, our training programs, magazine, and publications. I've got a few quick housekeeping items for you today, and we're going to get right underway with our content. We're lucky enough to have Bill Garner, IT Manager of the Business Process Automation Team, and Alana Schock, BPM Program and Product Manager, both from Lincoln Trust, with us today. And they will be sharing with us a presentation that they recently delivered at Lombardi's virtual user group. And the presentation was very well received there, and we appreciate Lincoln Trust and the folks at Lombardi bringing the presentation here for a feature, I guess, rebroadcast to members of BPM Institute. And I will turn things over shortly to Brandon Baxter, who's going to be our Master of Ceremonies today. Brandon is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Lombardi and has been with the company since its inception, and his duties there involve delivering projects for for Lombardi's BPM customers and acquiring new customers. Brandon is a native Texan and resides in Austin, Texas, with his wife and 2 children. And the topic of today that we're going to be discussing is how an organization can move from document workflow to BPM. We appreciate you all coming today. The most frequent requests we get at the Institute are leading practitioners looking to learn from other folks, lessons learned, and ways in which they can apply best practices to their implementation. And so we thank you both, Bill and Alana, for coming today. And at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Brandon Baxter.
Great, and we'll get started right away. We've gotten great feedback from the presentation and content we're going to share with you today. They're going to give you some insight of how they've actually evolved their document workflow into a full-fledged BPM, and leveraging both Lombardi Blueprint as well as TeamWorks. They're going to talk about some lessons learned as well as their experience from the first projects that they've been doing in their continuing education. So with that, I'm going to hand it straight over, and we're going to cover some questions at the end of their presentation. Bill?
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Well, welcome, everybody. Moved on to our agenda slide here. Agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about us, the technology we use here at Lincoln Trust, how we got to where we are today. We're going to talk about our first successes using Lombardi TeamWorks and what we've learned from our first implementation of TeamWorks. What we're working on now, we certainly have our top 5 recommendations, and it sounds like there'll be some question and answer at the end of the session. So about us, Lincoln Trust Company is located in Denver, Colorado. We have approximately 310 employees here in Denver. We're a financial services company with over $12 billion in assets under administration. We offer self-directed IRAs, ESAs, business retirement plans for individual account owners and employers, and a host of other financial solutions. In addition, we offer outsourcing solutions to community banks that want to offer these services to their customers. Again, we already had an introduction here, but my name is Bill Garner, and I'm the IT manager for a business process automation team here within Lincoln Trust. And Alana Schock is also a co-presenter, and she is our program and product manager for our BPM programs. The technology in use here at Lincoln Trust. We're going to talk very much today, and the focus of this presentation is how we've evolved from document management to true BPM. So a number of these components are outside of our BPM suite, which is Lombardi TeamWorks. And they'll start with our document capture technology, which is a Kofax solution. For document storage and retrieval, we use Oracle's imaging and process management solution that was formerly known as Stellent. And that's what we do all of our imaging and image repository components in, is Oracle IPM. And for all of our BPM and workflow automation, we use Lombardi. We're currently on TeamWorks version 6. For process documentation and mapping, we use Lombardi's Blueprint product. And we also have a BI platform on top of all of this, and we leverage Microsoft SQL Server, their analysis and reporting services, as well as Performance and ProClarity for a lot of data presentation and slice and dice analytical work.
All right, so this is Alana, and I'm going to talk about how we got to where we are today. We have kind of a long story. We started back in 1996, 2006. We had an imaging-only program throughout that whole time, and there were several attempts to start document workflow projects throughout that time frame, but they really ended up failing. I think there were 3 total, and they ended up failing primarily because they tried to implement overly complex solutions right away, or the scope was too big. We called them boiling the ocean type problems. Separately, we also had a process improvement team here that did a lot of great process documentation and analysis and data gathering, but they eventually ended up getting eliminated because there weren't ever any solutions delivering value for the business. So that's kind of the context that we entered into our BPM program here at Lincoln Trust. But by 2007, we had several challenges facing the company, a lot of them really around paper documents. We had 100,000 plus documents coming in every month. There were intensely manual business processes around those documents, and a lot of what we call shadow applications in Excel or Access to manage just the basic workflow data around those documents. And as a result, there was a real lack of visibility not only into where the documents were, but into where the processes that those documents support were, and a lot of lost documents as well. So in 2007, Bill and I started up what we called then our imaging / document workflow program, and we basically started off that program going through all the artifacts of the programs that had failed in the past to understand the work that had been done and where it might have gone wrong. And you know, we learned that, as I stated previously, they really suffered from overly complex solutions right off the bat and scope problems. So we decided that our approach would be to start off with a simple document workflow process, a process that would manage that which was common amongst the documents for a given business unit, the life cycle of those processes, and not go too much into the you know, very particular things about one of the business processes on the team. And what you see here on this map is, or rather on this slide, is what we called our Minimap, which was really just the states of the documents that we had to manage. And we said we'd start with this pattern and try to stick to this to get the company to go paperless. So we took this idea to our executive sponsors and said, you know, we need your help to support us. You know, you're not going to get all the bells and whistles, but we can get this done quickly so that we can eliminate or significantly reduce the pain from the paperwork problem that we were experiencing. They partnered with us and said they'd support us on that, and we created a roadmap of 10 releases about every 3 months. The releases were centered around business units to take those business units paperless using this simple document workflow pattern. And we had great success with that. By the end of 2008, our entire business was using the simple document workflow system. Some of them, you know, we still have left to put onto the system, but we got through all but 3 of them at this point, and we're still continuing that roadmap. But we measured in the first quarter of 2009 that the solution has paid for itself within the time that we've been implementing it, and by an overall operational efficiency gain of 25%.
Yeah, so what that means today is that we're delivering all of our client documents electronically through the system, and that in itself was a huge impact. It was not full BPM or what we consider BPM. It was a simplified approach to getting the paper off the floor.
Right. But as you would probably expect, in 2008, a significant amount of change happened with our company that we had to accommodate in our roadmap. Several things converged at once, and we had to take a look at what we were doing and make some adjustments. One of them was that we'd really gained some credibility based on what we had delivered, and that created a lot of demand for more, actually, for more, really more automation beyond that sort of simple model that we showed you. And the workflow tool we had at the time just really didn't accommodate it without a significant amount of custom code. And we knew from our study of prior attempts at implementing workflow automation here that a large amount of custom code was kind of a trap, and we wanted to avoid that. At the same time, our company was going through major change. We were a different company at the time, and we were being sold to another company, and then Lincoln Trust Company, who we are now. And as a result, there was a big effort in IT to pick and choose which applications we wanted to keep or not. And as part of that evaluation, there was a realization that we had a lot of legacy applications that were really workflow or business process management type applications that if we had a better tool, we could not only accommodate document workflow that we had been doing, but these other types of processes and these legacy applications. So where that left us is with the realization that we needed a lot more flexibility in terms of what we had to deliver for the business. And we made a decision that we, having spent so much time in our imaging workflow system, that we really wanted a BPMS instead of a workflow solution that's tied to an imaging repository, because we found through working with Oracle IPM or Stellent IBPM that it had a lot of pre-built hooks into the imaging system for sure, but we were kind of constrained by those, and we really needed more freedom and flexibility in the solutions we wanted to design. So we picked, Bill's going to talk about our...
Yeah, well at that point when we realized we'd kind of extended the capabilities of our document management system, and we had a real desire within the organization to do, I would say, true BPM type projects. We went and evaluated several BPM vendors. We did a pretty exhaustive study. We ultimately, based on a set of weighted criteria that we'd chosen, I think there were about 60 criteria, we got to 3 vendors and asked each of those vendors if they would do a proof of concept for us. We sort of did a bake-off between 3 vendors, and as an outcome of that, we selected Lombardi Teamworks, and then we are where we are today, so we'll continue to talk about that. So our next slide here is our first successes in Lombardi Teamworks. As Alana noted before, the company was going through a major divestiture of business, and we were in the middle of a different kind of acquisition. And as an IT group, we had a lot of legacy applications that we needed to retire. And as a part of that, our first Teamworks projects were not tied to an imaging model. They were more system replacement projects for things like doing service requests and managing trade requests. So these would be mutual fund and stock trades. And we had some different distribution rejection request processes. So we started with 3 pretty major processes, and they were enterprise-wide. So our first rollout of TeamWorks literally pushed this out through our intranet to the entire company. And we deployed those in, roughly several month project, and deployed those at the beginning of this year, in January of this year. And all of that work set the foundation, the infrastructural foundation for additional processes which we're deploying now, which include integration with our Stellan imaging system. The next slide is just put up here to give folks an example of what our coaches looked like. Those are our TeamWorks forms, and there's not too much to talk about here except that these are the type of screens that users work with, and they're all presented within a portlet within Microsoft SharePoint. So our users log into their intranet, and these Lombardi or these workflow process screens appear as they're doing their daily work. Again, next couple slides are just some examples of how folks are managing their work using TeamWorks. We have implemented SLAs in the system, and these are some of the TeamWorks scoreboard and My Team Performance views that are from our production system. So what we learned from our first TeamWorks implementation. In our case, we really chose to work with experts to get us off the ground. We knew it was a major endeavor. We knew we were working under very tight timelines for our first deployment. And we reached out to Lombardi Professional Services to help us. They helped us set up our environments and helped us with our process infrastructure. And that approach worked very well for us. Another thing that I think we learned in our first true BPMS deployment is what we call sort of the business analyst or BA myth. And we kind of felt like this myth wasn't just driven from any vendor. It was across every vendor we talked to in the BPM space as we were looking to solutions. And that was that, with these cool tools, your BAs can do all the work, and they don't need IT. They can design their own processes and implement them. And we really found that if you want to be successful with BPM, particularly on your first rollouts of a BPMS, that you have some very significant kind of IT architectural approach to this, how you're going to store your data, how you're going to set up your environments, how you're going to manage governance and technical standards and all these other issues. And we're going to talk more about that. But I think if you're choosing a BPMS thinking that if you work on the business side, or you think you can have a small team of BAs that can do this outside of IT, there's a lot of work that BAs can do in a BPM program, no doubt. They can design processes. There are all sorts of things you can do in Blueprint that are fantastic. But getting an enterprise-wide deployment off the ground is going to require more than a BA skill set, at least initially.
Yep, and along those lines, a key role for us, especially with the way TeamWorks leaves open the data model for business data, we had a data architect that works with us here in IT really take time out and plan out a good data model for us for TeamWorks business data. And that's paid dividends with all of our projects since then. But we learned that doing that upfront was a really good thing instead of making data an afterthought, especially because we are a data-driven organization. We have a corporate performance management program and believe strongly in business intelligence. So we really needed that upfront analysis and design from a data architect. The other thing that we learned is that and we learned this even from our document workflow implementations in Stellan, IBPM, or Oracle IPM, is that having an organization that can support a more iterative and agile approach to projects is really helpful, because you can, work, for 3 months on something and deploy it, and kind of negotiate with the users. If not everything they want is there, that you'll do it in the next release. And with our organization, we've always delivered in the next release, and they've continued to support us in this agile approach. And to that end, another thing that's really helped us with that is to keep a backlog of the types of things that come out from after we deploy, people saying, oh, we'd also like this, and can you do this, or bug fixes, things like that. Keeping a detailed backlog prioritized by the business has been very helpful to us to make sure that we're continuing to deliver what they want and not what we think they want.
So to continue on what we learned from our first implementation, we definitely found Blueprint to be a fantastic tool for process documentation. And we were able to just gain incredible amount of visibility and insight, and capturing a really important process data in the tool. This is, Blueprint for us has been a tool that the BAs have been able to run with, and both communicate and collaborate with IT. In our case here, we literally had plotters running kind of around the clock. We've been burning them out with all of the Blueprint process mapping that folks have been doing on the business side, and it's really allowed us a standard format or forum to have process conversations. We find that we can sit around with everybody from our executives to throughout the business and back through IT and to our processors and folks in our mailroom, and we can all sit down and we're all on the same page in terms of our conversations about what we need to do, and using a tool like Blueprint has really facilitated that in really good ways. It's really,
we've even been using it for IT projects where we're not developing solutions in Teamworks. We've found that it's just such a great way for doing any IT project, documenting the process as is, and to be, whether it's implemented in Teamworks or not, it's really catching on as an IT as an artifact of IT projects. Really, even whether there's a Teamworks implementation or not, which has been an interesting development, I would say. And then the other thing that we've learned, especially with our document workflow implementations in Teamworks that we're going to talk about here shortly, in sort of engineering all of that in Teamworks, that gets a little complex, making sure that users have all those hooks into the imaging system that they had in Stellent and Oracle. And for that type of complex process, we've used storyboarding to complement the Blueprint map. So when you're looking at a process activity, before the coach is created, even in a simple state in the Teamworks BPD, which is what we implement in Lombardi Teamworks, storyboard, just even in Visio to show the sample user interface that you can pair up with the Blueprint has been very helpful for us. Helps the users visualize the process, how the process will operate, just without just looking at a process map. So that's helped us a lot. The other major lesson, I think, that we learned from our first Teamworks implementation, and really from all of our implementations, even before Teamworks, is that the right team is very important. And we quote Jim Collins here from Good to Great about getting the right people on the bus. And we list here all the different roles that have been very key to us. We have fabulous executive sponsors who are engaged. They're committed, and we keep them well informed. We meet with them regularly. They get us resources. They help us resolve issues. They make good, solid decisions for us in terms of where they want us to go next. That is a huge benefit that we have here. And then we have great engaged subject matter experts from the business. We've been really fortunate that way. They're sort of process thinking. They really think about the processes on their teams, and that's a really big benefit for us. So we try to seek those people out when we get into a business unit, and then keep in touch with them even after we've deployed something, so that for subsequent implementations, or even when we're implementing something somewhere else and we need some business unit guidance, we deploy them as our sort of boots on the ground intelligence, keep us on the right track. The The BPMA or BA role is very key to driving these projects forward in a timely manner, and it takes a certain skill set, I would say, than maybe perhaps conventional business analysts would have. Being detail-oriented and being a process thinker, and not being immune to documentation, being real adept with blueprint, and making sure that all the good details get captured there. Having a process improvement or quality background is a bonus, definitely, we've learned. And then a technical process architect. This has really helped us too in terms of keeping our big picture in sight and making sure that our processes adhere to IT standards when they're implemented in Teamworks. This is a very key role for us. And then the data architect I've mentioned already. We have a user interface usability expert that we bring into all of our projects when it's time to design Teamworks coaches. And actually, even with the process flow, she works closely with our subject matter experts and makes sure that we're not putting something in that's technically sound and graceful, but not usable or clean from an interface perspective. And then, of course, strong project management skills, strong Teamworks developers are a must. And then this application steward model, we're still working on ourselves, but even with document workflow, and especially with Teamworks BPM implementations, the support model changes a little bit, and where you might have someone who is adept at providing technical support if something breaks. A lot of the types of support requests that come up are sort of a hybrid between a technical issue perhaps and a process question. So we're working on getting our application support staff to become more stewards of the application and more familiar with the processes to support that type of need. And then just to talk briefly about what we're working on now. So we talked about this simple document workflow roadmap we had. That didn't stop once our priorities changed with all the the convergence of those different things happening in 2008. We still have at this point we only have one team left. At the time all those things changed, we had 3 teams left. But now we're handling those in Teamworks. So we created what we call the document manager service, or a set of services to handle all of the document management related activities that our Stellent workflow did with us to augment a Teamworks process. So we've just kind of shifted our remaining roadmap simple document workflow deployments to Teamworks. And eventually we'll move, probably later on this year, we'll migrate all of the document workflow that we had in Stellent, Oracle IPM, over to Teamworks into this similar type of model. We're trying to stick with the same simple model as we do this in Teamworks workflow as well. But at the same time, now we have this flexibility to do more complex, more integrated and automated processes. So we have a strategy to make sure that if a team has if they're a paperless team and they have, let's say, 10 processes, but only one of them we've done the analysis and design to automate and integrate, we have a strategy to send documents to that process, for example, as opposed to document workflow. So that's our major focus right now, is running really 2 classes of projects. The document workflow projects that we were working on before, finishing that up, and then true BPM projects where they're more process-oriented and less focused on the documents. The other thing we're working on is creating our own BPM Project Framework for repeatable success. There's a lot of fabulous information out there on BPM frameworks. We've got several books ourselves and read up on BPM implementation frameworks on several websites, including BPMI. But we have found that it's difficult to just take one of those and directly, without any modification, apply it directly to our organization. So we're currently in the process of taking several of them and tailoring them to our organization so that we incorporate all the best practices of them, but it's flexible enough so that we can flexible enough for the bureaucratic tolerance of our organization, I guess I could say, so that it has the right level of documentation and artifacts. Then we're also documenting all the roles and the responsibility and the communication requirements and project phases that we need for a BPM project. These will become our sort of living guiding documents for our BPM Center of Excellence, which we're also forming right now, which at this point is just a SharePoint site and a series of meetings that we have with the business. But that seems to be the right amount of Center of Excellence for us right now. And then also, when we can, training and building our bench for the project role.
Okay, so this next slide is talking a bit about the challenges we're now facing. One, as Alana mentioned, we've had a lot of success, both with document workflow, so getting paper delivered electronically to folks, and now with an initial enterprise rollout of Teamworks and SLA management, and we literally have our president of our company talking about how there's going to be bonuses rewarded on performance, and we're going to use these tools, and there's all kinds of awareness. We've been having lunch and learns throughout the business to look at Teamworks and focus on blueprint and process mapping. We're doing all these things on top of delivering results with continuous deliveries on projects, and what that's all kind of culminated in, though, in this increased awareness, which is great, but there's this dramatic increase in requests and demands, everything from using the tool for optimization and simulation and all of these things, all fantastic, but just beware, when you have a limited team, you really have to, you don't want to let people down. You've got to manage those priorities. You've got a lot of demands on you. We certainly do now. A good problem to have, but it is an issue we face. The other was, or we still face, is a lack of trained BA staff for process analysis. We have a lot of smart people in the company, but with this demand, everybody's saying, well, we have a BA that we'll put into this, and just as Alana kind of alluded to earlier, if they haven't had some exposure to BPM and some exposure to process mapping and some exposure to process thinking, it takes some time to develop that. And we're still trying to build this competency around our BAs here within the organization. And then lastly, our internal standards and program framework are not yet in place, so we don't have, like we have BAs that are all getting into Blueprint, but we don't have all of our standards developed yet as to how we're going to format blueprint maps and process models and all these other things. So that's a challenge we're facing. Top 5 recommendations for folks getting into BPM.
Yeah, so I'd say number one, we've gotten a lot of support because we've always tried to deliver value quickly and strategically, just using basic project management skills so that we don't take on too much scope and complexity. We try to deliver in chunks so that people don't have to be waiting several months to get any value from what we're doing. The other thing that's helped us is keeping our executives, sponsors, and other stakeholders engaged and informed, and measuring and communicating the benefits of what we're doing in our projects along those lines. I think a key is that we feel like we need to earn their trust every day, you know, by communicating openly and honestly and frequently. So that's really helped us.
Yeah, third is as you're looking at tools, dig deep. You know, we spent a lot of time evaluating different BPMS vendors. We're very happy with Lombardi and the tools we've selected, but you want to make sure that you find tools that are the best fit for you and your organization and what you're trying to accomplish. So I highly recommend taking the time to do that level of analysis. And if you're working on document workflow type projects, or when I say that I mean trying to go paperless, we deal with tons of paper here. Definitely consider a simple standardized approach. We had a slide up earlier, but we didn't go into every business team and try to analyze and automate every single process that they do. We only looked at the processes as they related to dealing with a piece of paper. And that standard process we were able to roll out across the organization very quickly. I think in one of the first slides it showed like 96 to, there was like a 10-year period where nothing was really accomplished other than we were back-end imaging things. And then within a year we've been able to get the majority of the business paperless by following a simple approach. And we're following that right into Teamworks as we talk about managing documents. And then lastly, we talked about this already, but get the right people on the bus. Don't forget about data architecture, and make sure you've got really good people on your team as you start up a BPM program. Brandon, that was the end of our slides and presentation.
I mean, I think it's the third time that I've heard you guys present that, and I think it's great content. You guys talk about starting small, forming the right team, and you guys obviously, it sounds like, keep generating a lot of interest and keep continuing to grow your process improvement initiative. I have 3 quick questions, and then we'll go ahead and close off this webcast. The first is, you mentioned a lot of different people on your team. If you had to actually take one specific project, how big is that team, and how many people are fully dedicated? How many of those members are virtual? And explain a little bit about that size.
Yeah, okay. Well, we were always sort of running multiple initiatives, some big and some small. It's a bit of a challenge, but we've got, I would say, roughly a 15-person team. At this point in time, I'd say about 10 of those folks are fully dedicated, and that spans the gamut of testers to some developers, architects, and folks on the data side. As it relates, we also have some of those folks are at this point in time we're still able to leverage Lombardi Consulting. The reality for us from a budget standpoint is we won't be able to have consultants in here forever, but we have had that luxury up front. From a virtual member standpoint, we do leverage a offshore partner that helps us with this work. So we're using them for our development implementation work. And so out of those folks, that really represents both IT and the business. I would say from the business side, we have about maybe 3 folks on the team right now that are outside of IT. We get lots of other sort of business involvement and through all sorts of meetings and various other interactions, but I wouldn't call them dedicated or even partial or even half dedicated to the program itself.
Yeah, and I would say for a given specific project, so that's our whole team for a given specific project. For a high effort project, we usually have about between 3 and 4 Teamworks developers. Now this is a project that's really going to take us 3 months, maybe a little bit more. We'll have 3 or 4 Teamworks developers, 2 BAs, 1 PM, 2 testers. I'm trying to think of the other roles. So those are our most intense projects staff-wise. But for our smaller process or project initiatives, we really sometimes need only part of a PM, part of a BA, and part of a Teamworks developer. It really just kind of depends on what type of thing we've been asked to take on. But for our bigger projects, that team size is about right.
Okay, great. And this kind of leads on to that same, it sounds like same question, adds to that question. You guys talked about becoming self-sufficient, and it sounds like you are generating a whole lot of interest from other groups. What's your plan to get there? How are you taking your core team that's been doing this, those couple members, and expanding their knowledge into other people. Is there training that you're doing? What's your plan to become self-sufficient?
Is this regarding Teamwork's implementation, Brandon?
Yeah, both Teamworks and just in general the people that are documenting processes and doing this throughout the organization, which sounds like you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, so I'd say up front when we said we decided to work with experts, that was bringing in on our initial projects some Lombardi consultants, and we very much made it clear to them kind of day one coming in the door that if we deliver this project in 3 months but haven't gotten our own staff up to speed so that we can continue to succeed, this whole engagement will be a failure. And we really have worked, I would say, pretty diligently to make sure that there's sort of this constant mentoring and training, not just head down project work.
Yeah.
To the point where, we have daily stand-up meetings where we're asking that question on a regular basis. And at some points we've had to just set aside, an hour a day in the morning just for some folks to sit and be able to ask questions from some folks at Lombardi.
Sounds like you've had that plan from the beginning, and you ensure that mentorship is occurring from day one throughout the entire projects that are going on.
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. We've also leveraged some of the training courses that were available from Lombardi, but I would say mostly it's a mentoring component.
Like an apprenticeship model. I mean, even for not only for the developers but for the BAs, and that a lot of the learning on our team happens by doing with some guidance from people who have done before. Not only because, partly because we don't have a ton of time to stop and train people and, kind of onboard them. So we sort of have to have them learning by doing. But it's also an effective way of learning, though, with this type of thing. It's kind of hard to learn in the clouds. It's a little bit like riding a bike. So that sort of apprenticeship or mentoring model has a lot of merit that way.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we're seeing that from a lot of our customers that are doing BPM. Last question, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up, which is you mentioned you're using Blueprint to go document some of your processes. Are these business people that are doing it? Is it your business analyst? And then, approximately how many people are doing this in your organization using Blueprint?
Yeah, so it's a combination. I would say mostly folks on the business side, although we do have some folks that have understand Blueprint and understand process modeling on the IT side that will help to do some mentoring and facilitation with the business. We have roughly 30 people using Blueprint today, and we've already gone through and we're kind of tearing through documenting using Blueprint all the processes in the organization. So we outside of even document workflow or BPM projects that are officially approved, we've gone through what we consider our front office and mapped 30-some processes there. In our product operations area, one of our executive sponsors challenged every supervisor in that area to document one of their processes and come back to her with 5 process improvements for each one. And they have to present to her and to a larger group their process and how they're going to improve it. And they're not looking to improve it through an IT solution. They're looking for their own internal business solution. So we've literally got process maps up on the walls and idea boards, and there's all sorts of stuff being driven on the business side. And it's fun because they're dropping in on us all the time, saying like, I'd like to run this idea by you, and they're rolling out their process, and there's a lot of that going on. So out of those 30 people, the majority are on the business side, although we do use it within IT as well.
Cool. Well, definitely want to thank both of you guys for taking the time and presenting. I think it's a great story, and people are going to be able to learn, and leverage some of the lessons learned that you guys had. I wanted to reach out for everybody that's actually registered for the webinar. We've got an added bonus for you. We'll go ahead and sign you up for a free 30-day trial Blueprint account, and you should receive an email shortly after registration from Lombardi with all that login information. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Greg to wrap up.
All right, Brandon. Well, thank you very much. And I wanted to thank you and the folks from Lombardi for your ongoing support of BPM Institute and the BPM community in general. bringing Bill and Alana and introducing them to our members and letting them share their story, and also for extending a complimentary trial of Blueprint. I'd highly recommend folks check that out. The price is right, and it's a powerful tool with a lot of capabilities, and certainly help the folks at Lincoln Trust and has become part of their arsenal going forward. Briefly, I just wanted to thank you both, Bill Garner and Alana Schock, for coming and sharing your story with us today. When you're in the trenches and trying to implement these projects, there's nothing better than talking to folks that have done it, and we appreciate you coming, sharing that experience with our members. And my last note of the day is for those of our members that are based on the West Coast, if you'd like to have an opportunity to come visit with the folks at Lombardi and get your hands on the product and talk to some of their experts, they'll be with us at our San Francisco event at the end of June, June 29th to July 2nd. And so we encourage you to come and meet and talk with Brandon and the rest of the Lombardi folks there. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for their time today. We look forward to hosting you in upcoming webcast. And thank you again to the folks at Lombardi and for Lincoln Trust making this a very interactive and an educational conversation today. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.